Hello, this is Significant Brothers. I'm Kray.
I'm Brad.
And I'm Chase.
And today we are talking about the War on Christmas.
Boy, do I sure like celebrating Christmas this time of year. Wow, what is this, a war on Christmas?
It sure is, Jace. But where did this war start? So speaking of gunshots, Brad, what did the Puritans do with Christmas?
Well, they murdered people. No, it was like, one thing I thought was really interesting finding among my research is that the Christians were the first ones to have the war on Christmas. It was, they thought it was a pagan holiday with basically a thin coat of paint of Christianity thrown on top of it. So back in the early 17th century, Christians celebrated Christmas much like it was today, when possible. I mean, they didn't have all the lights and the fancy candy cane and
No Christmas
nutcracker.
tree.
What?
No Christmas tree.
No, I think they had Christmas trees.
Oh, did they? Oh, okay.
Maybe.
They probably didn't have the Nutcracker Suite because it wasn't written yet.
No, they didn't have that. But it still was. It was a Christian. It was viewed as a Christian holiday to an extent back then. But in 1647, the Puritans rebelled against King Charles I, forcing him to cancel Christmas. So by canceling Christmas, they forced shops to stay open, and the gospel was not allowed to be preached on Christmas, because apparently Christianity does not belong in a pagan holiday. Which I guess...
That is an interesting concept.
By canceling Christmas, you're forcing people to work and stay open. That? Or you're forcing people not to preach the gospel.
Well, you just think today if someone were to say, no, we need to make sure there's no Christianity preached on Christmas, you would think, they're starting a war on Christmas. Which I guess is essentially what they were doing.
The Christians were the first ones to have a war against Christmas.
So, this was in England?
This was in England, yes.
So there were other Christian groups besides the, what were they?
Puritans? Yeah. Mostly the Catholics.
So the Catholics celebrated it.
Yeah, they wanted to.
The Anglicans.
The Anglicans. And so, okay.
And again, Christmas is still being celebrated in other parts of the world. But this is mostly just a look at the Puritan Christmas uprising. Mm-hmm. Or anti-Christmas uprising. So, like all good Puritans did, they didn't all go to America, but that's basically who the first group of people to go to the Americas to settle were the Puritans. In 1687, Puritans are in full force. There's a decent settlement going on over in the Americas right now. Minister Increase Mather explained in 1687 that Christmas was not to be observed because Christmas was a pagan holiday, and just because it was metamorphosized by the Christians to be a Christian thing, that wasn't a good enough excuse. So they continued not to celebrate it, but other visitors to the colonies and stuff like that from other settlements that weren't made by the Puritans, they still celebrated Christmas. They thought it was a good thing to have. But William Bradford, bless his heart, he drunkenly fell off the Mayflower. No. But he yelled at visitors coming in. He found them in the streets at play openly, some pitching at the bar, some were playing stool ball. But eventually, the Puritans were able to ban Christmas from 1659 to 1681. Arrests were anywhere from getting charged 5 shillings to celebrating Christmas to arrests were made for anyone celebrating the Christmas holiday. And this war on Christmas lasted. It got unbanned eventually in 1681, but the war was still ongoing until Christmas became a federally recognized holiday in 1870.
They kept up that bit for that long?
Yeah.
Wow.
Wait till 1870?
Yeah, until our secular government enacted it as a federally recognized holiday.
But it didn't so it was 1659 to 1680?
81.
81. So it became legal again to do it, but it wasn't federally. Okay.
But they still kind of held their things like, oh, no Christmas celebrating because it's secular.
I hear there's another group of curmudgeons, Chase, that wanted to wage a war on Christmas. What was that all about?
It's true. So imagine you're in New York City in 1912 and you're working for a department store. You would most likely be a woman because that was a job that a lot of women held at that time. And most of the time, it was kind of expected around Christmas time that if you worked for a department store, you would buy your shift leader a Christmas present, and it would be about 2 weeks worth of pay. Christmas present.
Each person?
Yeah, each person. Each person was expected to buy a very expensive gift for their shift leader. So there was this one fund called the Working Girls Vacation Fund. It was a savings plan that people could put their money into, and it was a great thing, but it was kind of counterintuitive because you had to spend pretty much all of the money in that account to get a present for your shift leader. So everyone thought, this is stupid. Why are we doing this? This expectation to give a gift to somebody is stupid. We should want to give a gift instead of being forced to give a gift. You weren't by law forced to, but it would look bad for you and you might actually get fired if you didn't give a gift to your boss. So there is this group called the Spugs. Spugs War on Christmas is what this is called, and Spugs stood for Society for the Prevention of Useless Giving. And this was one of the big rallies to have a war on Christmas of like, this is not from a religious standpoint, but from a secular standpoint of giving gifts is stupid. Why are we doing it if we don't want to? So one of the things that they did is they wore these white buttons that said Spugs, and it had their phrases of like, will you stand with us? And, you know, it was this rally to take down the shift managers. There were about like 5 people who were like on a certain shift at least. So there were like 5 people decide not to give them a gift. They can't fire all of us. So it's just like pretty much like a union thing of everybody joining this thing. It was 10 cents to join. You got the white button. You got to attend a lot of their meetings. And it was criticized almost right away by people in newspapers saying that it's just a cover for tightwads who don't want to fork over money because, you know, people going against the status quo, it seems so weird at first. Like, what do you mean you don't want to celebrate Christmas? Like, that's stupid. It's snowing out. You gotta celebrate Christmas. I can't think of another reason why people should celebrate Christmas, but if you don't want to give a gift, you shouldn't have to give a gift. So it was mostly... And for a long time, it was just women in it because mostly women worked on the shifts, but there were a few men, and men wanted to join, and they said, no, this is just a women's thing. And the first male who actually joined was a Teddy Roosevelt, who said, I want to join. I support your cause. And so pretty much he said, yeah, if you don't want me in, you don't have to let me in. And they were like, fine, Teddy Roosevelt can join.
Was Teddy Roosevelt like important at this time? Was he president?
I don't think he wasn't president. He was 1912. So he was past his time, I think.
No, he was still an important guy.
Yeah, he was. And I think at this point wasn't he in a Bull Moose Party at one point? He tried to get reelected and he didn't?
I don't know. Yeah, he was maybe running against Taft at that point.
I think so.
I'm not sure.
So they let him in, and then right after that, they let all men in. They had about 2,500 members in 82 different groups of people meeting, and that included men. So this was just a big thing where they would all meet and they would all gather, and it was, I think, a time, you know how, like, if people are outraged about one thing, somehow a riot starts because people want to push their other agenda of, like, I'm a bad person, I'm going to take this good thing and turn it into something else? Well, this one woman named Miss Kate Barnard, or Little Miss Kate, or Oklahoma Kate, was at this meeting, and she turned it into an anti-marriage thing for women, be like, if we're not going to, and it was about the 8-hour labor law, how if we're going to work 8 hours a day, women shouldn't get married, and it turned into this whole, like, completely other thing. So there was a little bit of a disjoint with it, but the people who actually started it were Anne Morgan and Eleanor Belmont.
Oh, I think I going to say Eleanor Roosevelt.
Oh. Well, it's almost nice to see that, you know, when something terrible happens in the news, and then you go on Facebook and you see someone say, why are we upset about this tragedy if we're not upset about this other tragedy? And they try to take a tragedy and use it for their own sort of political gains. It's almost nice to see that that's not just our generation, that has happened before, and it'll probably happen forever.
No, yeah. So this was a very they did not actually do anything, but the biggest sign of change was when they changed their name from the Society of Prevention of Useless Gift Giving to the Society for Promotion of Useful Giving.
Oh.
Yeah. So they hosted events then, so people could take their money and give it to the poor or people who needed gifts, and they had this big thing that they had this big advertisement in the paper that said, "We'll make useful presents to every lonely person who comes," to this big event that they had.
I think that's always a really good way to get your cause going, because no one really likes supporting a negative cause. Like,
Yeah.
Spug, like, it was like they had a good idea, and I think that's a great idea what they had. Mm-hmm. But that's a really good way to get someone behind your cause, is to turn it into a positive thing.
Yeah, because the thing is, they're taking what the people who said they were tightwads, and they're like, no, we want to use this money, but we want to use it towards something useful instead of just like our boss who doesn't need a gift. Like, there are plenty of people who do need this. So the eventual one of the things that the big cracks in this group was they were anti-commercial and originally a feminine group that they still kind of held on to. So advertisers saw a crack in it, and they targeted the men, and they advertised saying like, Spugs get a discount on this thing and a discount on this thing. And there was an ad in papers like saying like, if you're in the Spug group and you show us your pin, you can get all these like gifts and stuff. And they encouraged more gift giving, and so that is one of the things that dismantled the Spugs. Now the only like remembrance that we have of the Spugs is people giving cheap cards instead of gifts.
I do like the idea behind Spugs, but I also think there's definitely people in there who are just cheapskates, who are just like, I don't want to spend money on people, so I'm just going to pretend I'm doing it because I'm against useless gift giving.
Yeah, no, it's like, would you rather give 10 cents for the badge or, like $50 for a gift or something?
It's like, son, I didn't give you anything because I'm a Spug now. And you don't deserve it.
The useless gift giving? You're useless. The Spugs were a group that were active a century ago. What's happening with the War on Christmas now?
I'm glad you asked, Chase. The war on Christmas that's happening right now, right as we speak and sit here, people are dying.
This war is happening in our own backyard.
Yeah, it is, and it's a mess. The war on Christmas that's happening in the modern day context is uniquely American. So, before 2005, if you type in the title War on Christmas in sort of a survey of historical newspapers, you won't find anything about the War on Christmas in the context that we use it today.
What happened between 2004 and 2005?
So to understand what happened, Chase, we have to go back to the mid-20th century. There were groups like the American Civil Liberties Union and the Americans United for the Separation of Church and State who found problems with things such as government endorsement of prayer and catechism in public schools, because in the United States we have a whole separation of church and state thing, so under that you really shouldn't have those things. So they started with court cases like that just to sort of endorse that governments shouldn't be favoring one religion over another, but they also shouldn't be disapproving of certain religions over one or another. It's like striking that balance. And that's also led to businesses sort of going along with this, because, businesses now are trying to reach a more diverse clientele, so they're changing their slogans from Merry Christmas to Happy Holidays, Season's Greetings, all that. And all of this sort of created a perfect setting for someone to come forth and say there is a war on Christmas, which happened in 2005. Bill O'Reilly kind of had like a segment on Fox News saying, there's a war on Christmas, and a guy named John Gibson came out with a book titled in 2005, The War on Christmas, highlighting specific cases of trees being taken down and stuff like that, people saying Happy Holidays, and it being a blatant war on those people.
It's like you're being offended because someone else isn't celebrating what you celebrate. Like, if someone says Happy Holidays to me, I'm like, okay, that's fine. Someone says Merry Christmas, I'm like, great, you celebrate Christmas. Thank you for wishing that upon me. If someone came up to me and said Happy Hanukkah, like, oh, cool. Yeah, I wish good celebration to your holiday of choice as well. It's like, I don't see what the big deal is.
And they sort of, I think, out of this, they kind of created a scenario where it's best sometimes not to argue over something, because then you just end up fanning a flame.
I was going to say, the Bill O'Reilly thing in that book sounded like it was just fueling outrage of people who were upset about something that they didn't actually know they were upset about until Bill O'Reilly said something.
An example of this, because in my mind I'm like, the war on Christmas really isn't a thing, but there's an interest group called the American Atheists, and they will have like sort of programs called like the war on Christmas, like, yes, we are waging a war on Christmas, and it ends up getting, you know, them more subscribers and donations, which is sort of a direct result of Bill O'Reilly coming out and saying that. So Bill O'Reilly would have helped further his cause had he said nothing.
It's funny because, yeah, there wasn't a reason for anyone to be offended in the first place. Not really.
It's funny how it started. It wasn't because we were being... Christmas wasn't being attacked specifically. It was... You were broadening the view of what holidays were being celebrated in a certain area.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, because something's being put up that's not Christian, it's a direct attack on Christians, which is dumb. If it had just started with, no, don't celebrate Christmas if you're not a Christian, I could see the cause being more valid.
I don't know. Right now, obviously, the hot topic a few weeks ago was the Starbucks red cup, because they took away all that Christian iconography of snowflakes and Christmas trees. So a lot of people got upset over it. I think, I haven't really looked at the numbers, but my best guess would be they ended up selling more stuff because of this huge controversy.
Yeah.
Even though I'm not sure I've met a single person who's upset about it.
I think it's a beautiful cup.
Oh, yeah.
It's
a great
really
design.
well designed. The shade of red they picked, perfect.
I know.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, like, before I had even heard about the controversy, I looked at that cup. I saw someone with it. I was like, oh, is that their Christmas cup? I'm like, it looks very nice.
Yeah, the minimalistic thing. Which is, I think... I know nothing about this. I saw everything on Facebook. I didn't decide to research it further, but I assumed they were going for a minimalistic thing instead of cutting out the icons that might upset people.
Yeah, I think if anyone's going to learn anything from this podcast is if you're really upset about something, just do nothing.
Do nothing.
Always, blanket statement works for everything.
Hey listeners, be sure to subscribe to us on tinyletter.com/significantbrothers, and you can email us at sigbrotherspod@gmail.com.
And you can follow us on Twitter @significantbros.
And you can find us on iTunes. Just search for Significant Brothers. Be sure to rate and subscribe.
Do you guys want to go make snow angels in the backyard? No, wait. Snow...
Heavenly beings.
Heavenly supernatural beings.
Yes.
Angels.
Yeah.
Figures in the snow.